On May the 7th, we've got local elections across England, and today I'm interviewing the current leader of Basildon Borough Council, Gavin Callaghan. He's been in and out of local politics since 2012. He's run this council 3 times on 3 separate occasions, and today I want to get under the skin of the man who wants to keep his position and regenerate Basildon for the future. Gavin, how are you?
I'm good. I like the fact you call me the current leader.
Well, you are the current leader.
It could all change, couldn't it?
I mean, look, as the phrase goes, a week is a long time in politics, and you've only got a week left potentially as leader of Basildon Borough Council. If you were to meet a man on the street, a man or woman on the street, who kind of has a brief understanding, a basic understanding of what the council does, the cynical line would be, oh, they just collect bins and attempt to fix our roads. But how would you describe what you do to a random person you meet on the street who doesn't quite understand how this whole thing works?
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange job. I think that's the first thing to say. Because when you're the leader of the council, you're essentially the chairman of the board. Right, if you think of it in terms of a business, you're not the chief exec running the day-to-day. You're the chairman of the board, setting the direction, employing the personnel at the top, the policies, all that kind of stuff is what you get involved in. I see it, when you break all of that down, as to the man or woman on the street, my job is to keep them safe. That's the first thing. That's the first job of any leader of any council. So making sure whether they're working in the borough, living in the borough, got family in the borough, that they're safe in our borough. My job is to try and create opportunity for them as well. So whether that be opportunities to spend their money in town centres that are thriving and doing better than we've had, whether that's opportunities in terms of more jobs and creating more opportunities through economic development and that kind of stuff. Opportunity to buy houses or to rent houses, or for their children to be able to buy or rent houses locally. Housing is a huge part of what we do. And my job is to ensure they get value for money, so that their money is being spent wisely and it is not being thrown away and the council taking unnecessary risks. But
on money,
yeah,
just to cut you off quickly, on money, there is this misconception that when you pay council tax, that Basildon Borough Council spends 100% of that income. That's not strictly true, which is why we've got this divide between people saying, well, Gavin, why can't you fix the potholes, to Gavin, where's my council house? What's the differentiation in cost? I mean, if you pay, £1,000 a year for council tax, how much of that actually stays within the borough?
Yes, it's a good point. So I think if I had £1 for every time somebody asked me to fix their potholes, I'd probably have these 3 houses in Dubai that I'm accused of on a weekly basis.
Can I borrow a bedroom?
Well, there you go. You can rent one out.
Yeah.
But in terms of if you were paying £1,000 a year for your council tax, £800 of that is going to go to Essex County Council. And of the remaining 200, only 140 of it is going to stay in Basildon. So, if you think about it like that, every household paying £1,000, 140 quid stays in Basildon, and yet I am held to account for 100% of the problems and the issues. I go out and about around the borough. I do these Meet the Leader events in all 5 towns, and one of the questions that I ask the public is, put your hands up if you know who the leader of Essex County Council is. And in every single event I have held, not a single person has put their hands up. This idea that a guy, you're going to get me started talking about local government reorganisation now, right? My pet project.
We'll get onto that for sure.
But yeah, it is a complete waste of money to have this 2-tier system. So going back to the man and the woman on the street, that's broadly what I would say to them. But then as a councillor, not as a council leader, right? And I think this is sometimes forgotten about. My job is to help, right? So a lot of the time I meet people when they come to see me or they're in my inbox, it's because they're in a really desperate situation. They have exhausted all avenues. The state has failed them. They've not been able to get answers independently when they've been trying to talk to people. and they want me to advocate on their behalf. And I think that is a really important part of our democratic system that people often don't focus enough on, is advocacy. And so I spend a lot of my time, I don't see my job as leader of the council to be the defender of the status quo, right? I don't see my job to be the kind of the corporate body's public voice. My job is to be the public's voice in the council. So there should be healthy friction all the time between me and my cabinet with the officer corps as we're trying to push things in certain directions on behalf of our public. Too often what you find that people get into my position and they kind of become the status quo. We've got to defend everything the council's doing. We've got to defend every decision the council is making. That's not how I approach the job.
I've always found you to be a rebellious politician. Obviously, I know that your stripe is Labour, but within that, there has always been this air of, I don't like how this is being done, therefore I'm going to, bang on the table and say, well, I want it moving in this direction. And invariably, that will cause you to make enemies and maybe even make some great friends because of that leadership style. But where did that come from? I mean, you went to university, the first person in your family to go to university. Originally, politics wasn't going to be your lane. It was going to be sports journalism, correct? Mm-hmm. Where did you pick up the bug for politics, and what did you get any leadership skills from university when you were studying the subject of politics?
Yeah, like I talk about this a lot to students when I go into schools, right? And I always say politics, right? There are no straight lines anymore in politics. It used to be the case that you could say, I'm going to go to this university, I'm going to go and work for this MP, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. It's not how it works, right? I remember when I was in school and I'd finished my GCSEs, and I'd just done my last ever GCSE, which was a chemistry exam, and I was not very good at science. Doesn't interest me at all, and I couldn't wait. And it was one of those days where you finish your exams and then you get the entire summer off. So I was sprinting out of the school gates, and this teacher clobbered me before I left and said, "We're introducing a politics A-level in September, and we think you should do it." To which I kind of said, do I look like a boring bastard to you? Like, why would I do a politics A-level? That is of no interest to me at all. And I left for the summer, not thinking at all about it and not thinking I was ever going to do politics. And that was the summer of the 7/7 terrorist attacks. And on the day of those terrorist attacks, we didn't know if my dad and one of my sisters was on one of the trains.
Wow.
Because they worked in and around Aldgate. And I remember thinking, and bear in mind, this was only 4 years after 9/11 as well. So it was that kind of era where things were going on all around you. And I remember thinking in the summer, maybe you should understand a bit more about this stuff if it's that close to home. Thank God my family were not involved in it. But when I went back to do my kind of options for my A-levels, politics was the only one in this category other than science. I thought, well, I'm not doing science, so I'm going to have to take the politics one. And I ended up finding myself really interested in it, like being able to watch the news as a 17-year-old kid and understanding what Nick Robinson was talking about on the BBC and thinking, well, this is quite interesting. And I'm not from a political family. My parents didn't talk about the budget or any of that kind of stuff around the table. But I ended up getting like 100% in my A-levels, in my exams. But I was down to go to university to study classics. And it was my dad, actually, who said to me, he was like, well, don't look a gift horse in the mouth, Gav. You're obviously better at that than you are at that. Why don't you see if you can change your degree? So I said, yeah, all right, I'll do that. And I rang them up, literally, in the summer and said, can I change to politics? And they said, yeah. And yeah, you're right. I wanted to be a journalist. Like my passion, my entire, it still is, I would love to be, is a football commentator. I don't think there's a better job in the world than sitting on a gantry talking about football for 90 minutes. I think it'd be ideal. But I got the bug for politics. And you said about being a rebellious, like I'm a Blairite. So I grew up around, the Tony Blair government, and I went to university in 2007. Blair had just left office and Gordon Brown was in at that time. And Blair has this line in his autobiography that whilst it is true to say that my head sometimes thinks conservatively with a small c about matters of economics, my heart beats progressive and my soul will always belong to that of a rebel. And I read that and I was like,
that was you,
mate, if you could describe me and my politics, that is exactly it to a T.
Yeah, and I've always known that you put him on a political pedestal. What is it about him in particular, as you've mentioned him, that inspires you the most? I mean, people criticise Tony Blair for a number of different things. We don't have to get into those subjects, but I am curious as to how your life experience has shaped you as a politician, and I'm wondering how much of his influence is
massively
on you today.
Yeah, massively. So again, you got to think back to I started secondary school in the year 2000. By the time I left school in 2007, by the time I left university in 2010, in that decade, the jobs that, take for example, the jobs market, right? In that 10-year period, the two fastest growing sectors in the British economy were the financial services and the creative industries, right? That creative industries would never, ever, ever have taken off to the level that they were without that Blair government. So if you wanted to be a journalist, if you wanted to get into podcasting, if you wanted to get into any of that stuff, you owe it to that period of time where he created the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, and he invested in all of that technology and all those different industries. So by the time I was graduating and people were saying to us, would you like to apply for jobs in social media content production? I mean, that didn't exist in the year 2000, do you know what I mean? Yeah. So we saw in that decade that fundamental shift and change. He made it possible for people like me to go to university. I'm the first man in my family. My parents, it would never have come into their head growing up in Stepney in the East End to go to university. And yet all three of their children have. So my sister is a lawyer. She could have been a legal assistant. My other sister is a teacher. She could have been a teaching assistant. I am a politician. I could have been a black cab driver, right? That would have been the family route I would have gone down. So all three of us have managed to do better than our parents would have otherwise have expected us to do, because we were given that university education. But above all with Blair, for me, number one, he was a winner, right? 3 successive general elections. If he'd have stayed on, he'd have won a 4th, right, in 2010. And the other thing...
Maybe this time you'll do one better than him then.
Well, maybe. 4th term Callaghan. I didn't think of that. We'll say that next week, if we hang on. But the other thing about Blair was that he was a pragmatist, right? So he understood that you have to bring people with you if you're going to make change happen. And sometimes it means you might have to give a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, but ultimately, as long as you're moving forward and making progress, these people that are just, on both sides of the spectrum, if it's not perfect, don't do it. Actually, as long as you're making progress, and I think about things like gay marriage, right? Blair couldn't introduce gay marriage because the country wasn't with him at that point. So he introduced civil partnerships, and he was taking us on the journey that ultimately 10 years later, Cameron was able to say the country's now ready for it. And there's so many examples of where I think he fundamentally shifted the plates of politics in a much more progressive, positive direction. I only wish we had that now.
I'm sure you do. Now, before you mentioned Tony Blair, you were talking about football and 7-7. You worked on Hillsborough.
I did, yeah.
The disclosure campaign that you worked on then, being political and into football, and obviously trying to find some justice for what happened in that situation, the success of that campaign, what did that teach you about where power really lies and how to maximise the use of it?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't want to overplay it. I played a very, very, very small part. Right? I worked for an MP called Steve Rotherham, who's now the mayor of Liverpool, and my job was to help him to put together his speeches, his articles, and work with him and Andy Burnham on the stuff around Hillsborough. The first thing I would say is that collection of families that lost their loved ones on the 15th of April 1989. They didn't choose to kind of come together. They were thrown together by circumstance. And what I learned from Steve in particular was his ability to connect with the public was unbelievable. Like he could sit in a room and he could just talk to people on a really human level about their experiences and about what they had seen and felt and gone through. And it was a real lesson for me. I was 21, 22 at the time, of sitting there and watching a politician that understands that politics is about human beings, and it is always about understanding where the public are at and what their experiences are. But Steve had a really interesting portfolio, and I ended up staying working for him for about 4 years in the end, because he was also at that point on the DCMS Select Committee when the phone hacking scandal was also going on. So we had Hillsborough, but we also had the phone hacking scandal, and he was involved in all of that inquiry when Murdoch came, and the famous Rupert Murdoch Select Committee appearance and all that kind of stuff. Steve was on that, and I was helping him prepare for that. And I think what that period did, and whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, I don't think history has yet fully judged this, but I think it showed a dark underbelly of how the state can work and how it can really work against people. Because pre-Hillsborough, so the report came out on the 17th of October, or the debate in Parliament was the 17th of October 2011. The report came out on the 12th of September 2012. And I remember writing Steve's speech for that report, and the shock in the House of Commons. I was sat in the House of Commons chamber when that was happening, and the shock of people hearing that the police had altered statements, hearing that the police had drug tested a 10-year-old kid, hearing that they had worked with the press to manipulate the story to blame the fans, even though they knew it wasn't the fans' fault. The fact that the press could be found to be hacking a missing, now dead schoolgirl's telephone, all of those things at the time seemed so unbelievable. And yet now, 15 years later, we wouldn't be surprised at that level of corruption and toxicity in the state. And that, I think, was a real tipping point for a lot of people. I think that may have contributed to Brexit. I think that may have contributed to what we're seeing now with the rise of the populist right. But I think we had to shine a light on it because those failings had to be exposed. But I don't think we've then properly thought about how we reorder those public services to regain that public trust. I wasn't there, but at the same time, you also had the MP's expenses scandal going on and all that kind of stuff. So that period of sort of 2009 to 2011-12, that was a really kind of seismic period in politics, and I was right in the middle of it. And I learned a lot of lessons there about, as I say, about politics, about people, and about how the state needs to be used in a positive way, not in a negative way.
Yeah. Moving on to your position as a council leader, what is it actually like running a local council? Because I think people will watch a live stream once in a while and they'll see clips that certain politicians put on social media for rage or to, get something popping off.
Who could you be talking about?
I dare not mention who. I mean, all politicians do it. I mean, it's not one in particular, but many of them do it. And I was wondering, like, beyond Gavin Callaghan, leader of Basildon Council, and the meetings that you attend, how does it make you feel being a council leader? Like, when you wake up at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning and you think, right, I've got this agenda today, what's that actually like?
It's hard work, right? But it's also a massive privilege. So as you very kindly said at the beginning, this is my third stint at doing this job. And a day in administration is better than 10 years in opposition, right? So you can get more things done, you can achieve more in administration. Typically, there's different parts to being a council leader that you have to manage. So to give you an example, you have to manage your political party, your group. So I've got 16 councillors, I've got to manage them. You've then got your cabinet that you've then got to manage. I've got my senior officers that I also have to manage, who are my directors and my chief exec, who are responsible for delivering the agenda. I have my political party, so I've got I've got the Prime Minister, I've got the people within the Labour Party, I've also got the local Labour Party membership that I've got to manage. I've got the opposition on the council that I've got to keep an eye on what they're doing and understand where they're going with things. I've got the trade union movement in the council that I've got to think about what they're doing. And then I've got a family outside of all of that where I've got to give them some love and attention as well. So at any one given moment, you are trying to balance all of those different plates and thinking through what the consequences of every decision you have for each of those different factions are. And you can't take your eye off the ball of any of them.
Did the relationships that you have with certain councillors, trade union members, even as high up as the Prime Minister, do any of those relationships come into your decision making? So if you think, I've got this wonderful idea to build 1,000 homes somewhere in the town for the next generation of people that want to buy homes, or get on the council list. I know you build council houses, and we'll get onto that in a little while. Do you think, all right, I might have to temper that because there are going to be some people in my group that may not want it, or this goes against the national agenda, or, because I think you're a leader in every sense of the word. I don't think people lead you, but I obviously understand that in politics you have to take into consideration how things are going to play out 5 chess moves forward as opposed to the actual moving of the pawn in that moment.
So I will test things out all the time, right? So when I do my Meet the Leader events, I'll test out ideas and lines just to see what the reaction is in the room. When I do my full council meetings and I make my speeches at full council, there'll be things in there that are not for that meeting. They're for what I'm thinking might happen in 3-4 months' time. I'll dangle the ideas, or I'll just test out some of the language. I'll do that kind of stuff in those meetings just so I can see in the room. And if I think this didn't go well, then that idea will never see the light of day. If I think actually that there was a few nodding heads or people seemed quite energised by that, I might think, right, we'll bring that forward. There's people within the council, everyone talks in the council that there's a kind of a trio of us that run the council, me, Adele and Aidan, right? So we will kind of talk all the time about, I'm thinking of doing this, or I'm thinking of doing that, or, sometimes I might even say, I think we're going to have to blow this up. I think we're going to have to make this a bit more interesting in order to allow us the space politically to be able to do this stuff or whatever. So you're always thinking like that. One of the other things that you have to remember is I've learnt a lot as well. So I've learnt that I can't necessarily go at 100 mile an hour on some things. I have to pull it back. I have to temper it. We have to take people with us as we go, or people will start putting leaflets out about monster tower blocks or whatever that don't exist and were never going to exist, right? But, you don't want to give people the opportunity to look at that. But so I will be thinking
that was very
about
cheeky.
Well, I'll be thinking about all of this sort of stuff. And then going back to the day job, listen, I arrive at the council at sort of 8 o'clock in the morning. I very rarely leave Monday to Thursday before 10, 11 o'clock at night, right? So I'm there all the time. I think the Daily Telegraph said I get paid £370 for a meeting.
Yeah.
I wish I got paid that kind of money per meeting, right? Doesn't happen. But outside of all of that, so the meetings and the kind of the cajoling and the moving the chess pieces, you're doing an awful lot of reading, right? So you're putting together your agendas for meetings in 3 or 4 weeks' time. So the publication of those reports, almost like your red box if you were a minister, right? The letters that have come in, the policy briefings. There'll be a director who's trying to get you to think about, maybe spending some money on here. So they'll be putting things in front of you that you're reading as you go. So there's an awful lot of that, which is not glamorous and it's not on telly. But if you don't do it, you very quickly will get found out that you're not on top of the detail. You're not making good decisions, and your directors will start to lose a bit of trust and confidence in you. And then they'll start to think, actually, we can play him here. Because we can say, well, we gave you that and you've not read it, councillor. We thought you were okay with this or whatever. You have to put those hard yards in as well. So most of my evenings at weekends are spent reading all of these things as well and putting the hours in there. I think sometimes Joe Public think that I can walk into a building, I can pull a lever and this will all happen. When in reality, and I say this to businesses, right? A council is this juggernaut that's moving down the railway track, right? And as a leader, you like to think you're all powerful and all knowing, right? The reality is I'm going to veer it this way slightly while I'm in office. Someone's going to veer it that way slightly when they're in office. But ultimately, the council is going to keep moving down the track, right? And on any given day, we are probably running 60 different businesses as a council. Environmental health is a business that we're out. Building control is a business. The bin service is a business. Leisure, like there's about 6.
And how hands-on with all those businesses, as you've called them, are you involved? I mean, I'm assuming you don't dedicate your time to all 60 on a weekly basis.
No. So my point is, when I talk to business and say, why can't the council move quicker on this and the rest of it? I say, well, you're doing one thing really well as a business that you specialise in. We're trying to do 60 different things as a council, and it's all under the same umbrella, the same brand. Some of them are brilliant. So I would say, for example, our planning team, very commercial planning team, makes a lot of money, does a lot of good work with the community. But then there are other parts of our council, like, it's been well documented, our housing repairs service hasn't been great, right? And it needs a lot of work. Our whole housing service needs an awful lot of work. So you have to prioritise. My cabinet members, they are all responsible for those different portfolio areas. And I meet with them, on a regular weekly basis to say to them, what do I need to know? What's the red flags? What's the opportunities for us to advance things? And it's their job as cabinet members to keep on top of it. If things are starting to go badly wrong, and housing is obviously a pretty obvious one at the moment in Basildon, then yeah, I'm spending an awful lot of time trying to think through how we fix that and what the different steps are to change it.
How do you fix that? Because housing is always top of the list.
Yeah.
Invariably, every single election, it's what are we going to do with this? And, you get the usual rigmarole of, we're going to reduce fly tipping, which you've done. We're going to... Yeah, indeed. And you get the copy and paste politics, I like to call it, which bores the hell out of me. But housing is always top of the agenda. And I'm glad you mentioned it, because I did a Freedom of Information request a few years ago when there was a different leader of your group. And in 10 years, the council had built, I'm remembering a report from a few years back now, but it was roughly around 111, 112, 113 houses in a decade. How many houses have you built since you've been in charge of Basildon Council, and what is the future of housing in the town? Because I think people would like to know that.
So look, in terms of that figure and that number, what that will have been acquisitions. So that would have been that the council will have bought existing properties that have been built. Mm-hmm. I am the first council leader in 30 years to build brand new council housing. So since 2024, we've built 300. And the most visible of that is anyone who drives through Basildon Town Centre right now, opposite the BP garage on the Langdon Link roundabout. Those flats that are there, there's 70 flats, they're all council houses. The homes behind them are for private sale or rent to key workers and veterans, but the other 2 blocks are council, and we've got multiple different sites around Church Road, some of the other sites, Chalverdon Hall as well. This year, if we are re-elected on May the 7th, we are going to, we've got planning permission to get on with building another 412. So that will mean that by the end of my 3rd year, I will have wiped off 20% off the waiting list in 3 years. So that is a big movement in terms of where we are.
It's a huge shift.
Yeah. And the government announced last year a £39 billion fund for social housing. And we as a council have put to them a plan for how we could build 4,000 council houses over the next 10 years. Some of that is on the existing developments that are being built. We buy the affordable housing element off of them, and others are brand new sites where we would go and, like we've done on that car park, build it from the ground up. We've asked the government for £500 million to do that. So out of that 39 billion, we've asked for 500 million. Part of my job, going back to your previous question, is I'm on a train to Westminster very often to go and meet with ministers, to go and meet with officials in number 10 and the departments to say, Basildon needs to be number 1 on your list. So again, I go back to last year, Pride in Place funding that came out, one of the first on the list, Basildon, £40 million. Next door in Thurrock, got £1 million. We got £40 million in Basildon.
If they give the money to Thurrock, it will go and pay off their debts, won't it? So we can't
we'll buy a solar farm, mate. That doesn't exist.
Wind energy for Basildon, maybe? You got?
There's enough wind energy.
Is there a scam there? Maybe, I don't know.
There's enough wind coming out of the film in this election. to power the borough for a long time. But my point is, that's part of my job, is to go and advocate for Basildon and to be Basildon's voice in Whitehall. And we're not blessed with our MPs. We've got 4 pretty useless members of Parliament in our borough. That's just a fact. We've never had effective MPs. So I go up there and I make the case and I did it under the Tories and I've done it under this Labour government as well. And we've had some moderate success, but I want more. And a big one for me, if we're re-elected, is I want that £500 million to enable us to clear the council house waiting list.
Talking of the numbers, so you've said that you want to build 4,000.
Yeah.
How big is the social housing waiting list currently?
3,600.
So you completely wipe it out?
We will, not only will we wipe it out, but we'll create additional stock.
Yeah.
Because we will have done 700 by the end of year 3. So there should only be 2,900 waiting by the time we get to the end of this year, and then we should be in a position. As a councillor, it's been such a, I can't tell you, I won't name her, but there was one individual who came to one of my Meet the Leader events. She'd been living with her parents. She's got 2 children. She'd been living with her parents sofa surfing basically for 11 years on the council house waiting list. She got a council house this year. And it's the first time since I've been a councillor, since 2012, where we're actually starting to see people coming off the list and moving into council houses because we're building them. We are the only political party, and the independents, give them their dues, they're supportive of it as well. Reform UK vote at the planning committee every single week against building housing, against building council housing. The Tories vote every single week in planning against building council housing. So if you're sat there needing a council house, or your child or your grandchild needs a council house, it is illogical to vote for Reform UK because they won't build any.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to labour on that too much, no pun intended. But do you think that there's any credence to their objections? Because I know most objections for building houses will be, don't build on greenbelt land. Personally, I'm not too concerned about that because I think that there's a need. Mm-hmm. It's not a case of being able to drive through Billericay and seeing a green field on the side of the road, or driving in Langdon Hills and seeing a nice bit of verge there. I would actually like to see progress, when it comes to this situation, because I think with housing, if you have a house that's guaranteed, if social housing is more or less guaranteed if you behave and you pay your rent on time, that is the foundation, in my opinion, for growth. If you've got a society which actually gives people somewhere to live, and there's very, very small chance of them losing that accommodation, the only way is up. Mm-hmm. And if they go down, then that is, something seriously gone wrong there. But I do believe that there should be that foundation for people to grow and prosper. And I think that building council houses, I've always wanted the council to do more on that issue. I mean, I remember when I was a member of the Conservative Party, and during my... don't shake your head at me. I can see you shaking your head at me.
We all make mistakes, Charlie.
My leaflets were good.
Could have been better.
But they if I had my way, they would have been much more aggressive. But there we are. When I was with the Conservative Party, they didn't want to talk about social housing. I remember in particular one former councillor. He's since departed and gone to a different part of the country now. But that was the one thing he pulled me up on in my initial interview to join, was that, you want to build council houses, but we believe in home ownership. And I'm like, sure you do. But, many people don't have the ability to go and buy a house or get a mortgage, or come from a background where it's easy to get, money from the bank or money from family and get that deposit and everything else. So, I believe in it because I think that it doesn't eradicate social problems, but it's a massive step forward in eradicating those issues.
But I think, I've been around since 2012. I think on every single leaflet that I've put out, I talk about cleaning up the borough. I talk about abolishing Essex County Council. I talk about regenerating the town centres, and I talk about building council houses, right? And I'm a conviction politician in respect of those 4 things, right? And on council housing, you're absolutely right, because not only does it provide that stability, it provides better educational outcomes. That's a fact. Better health outcomes. That is a fact. And it helps to keep families together. And too many of our families are breaking up at the moment, right? And that is having adverse effects on mental health and on finances and all those other things as well. The other thing that it does, right, if you build houses, is it creates growth in the economy because it creates jobs. I've been creating the Construction Academy because I've said very clearly, with the number of homes that we have to build in this borough and the number of town centres we're regenerating, we are going to train the next generation of Basildon Brickies, Chippies and Sparkies and give them jobs for life, because they should be on the tools for the next 20, 30 years with the amount of building work that needs to happen in our borough. That gets them an opportunity to get a well-paid job that will enable them to look after themselves. But then you think about the plumbers and the electricians and the tilers and the windows and doors and the blinds and the landscape gardeners that all then get work off the back of people having houses and needing work done in the house. It helps to grow the economy and it helps to keep the economy local. So the government is betting the house on their growth strategy around the 1.5 million houses. But in Basildon, even if we build out every home that needs to be built on that local plan, we will still have 67% of the Greenbelt intact. Basildon is a new town, right? It's 77 years old. It's a baby. But in the last 8 decades, we have built 82,000 houses across the borough. We've built schools. We've built train stations in every one of our towns. We've built council buildings. We've built 2 council buildings. We've built town centres. We've built all of these things. It cannot be beyond the wit of man in 2026 to build a house. Like I just do not buy this argument that we can't build, or we can't build because then we haven't got enough schools, or we haven't got enough. Build them.
Yeah.
Like we've done it before. We can do it again. We opened a brand new school in Basildon 18 months ago. No one talks about it. Everyone says to me, we haven't got any school places. We opened a brand new school. It's being expanded at the moment. Yeah. Look at the infrastructure around health. There is not a borough in Essex that is expanding NHS provision faster and bigger than Basildon. Got a bloody hospital going into the Debenhams with a GP surgery and an NHS dentist.
Yeah, I've seen it.
£55 million community diagnostic. Everyone goes on at me about the arena costing all this money. The NHS Community Diagnostic Centre is more expensive, and it's being built in Pitsea right now. Yeah. That's if you need X-rays or blood tests, you're not going to go to the hospital anymore. You're going to go to Basildon Town Centre or to Pitsea. That is a good thing, and it proves that we can build this stuff if you've got a council that will just get on with it rather than procrastinating like we had for 20 years.
Let's touch on building for a moment, because you mentioned something there which I find quite curious, is that you think that the answer is just build it, which I think is a good...
Build, baby, build.
Build, baby, build. Okay, maybe you are moving more towards the right than I thought. Why do you think politicians don't want to build? I mean, look, I'll hold my hands up. When I was running for Basildon Council in 2021, I opposed building in the town centre. I wanted to run a very aggressive campaign. I wanted to call my campaign Tower Blocks for Tower Hamlets. Some people accuse me of trying to run a dog whistle campaign, which I don't really care about. I'm quite happy to take that. My politics is of the right anyway. But in hindsight, I was wrong. I'll admit that to you today. I've said this to you in the past, but I'll say it on camera, that I was wrong to oppose some of the development plans you had back then, because I think if I hadn't have opposed that and hadn't led part of a wider Conservative campaign so aggressively, maybe the fruits of your labour would have been realised a lot sooner for the benefit of the town. So
I blame you.
You can blame me. I mean, I'm holding my hands up and admitting that I made a mistake, something a politician rarely does. But why is it that you think politicians oppose building? Because it sounds to me like there's this feeling in your tone of voice that they just do it for the sake of it.
I don't. So again, right, 2 things. Number one, on the point about Tower Hamlets, they would not be able to, because the Basildon First Charter I introduced means that they are local Basildon people, and they're all signed up members and signatories to it. But on the second point, I think the system is now it's too broken, right? Because I mean, if I see another bloody Essex Live article that's got photos of Conservative Party members sat in a public gallery shouting and screaming at councillors and say, huge uproar about this, that and the rest of it. I mean, it's so sensationalised. You see these news articles, and that's the thing, right? Councillors are sitting there thinking, oh my God, what's going to be in the paper the next day? What's going to be in social media next day? I'll tell you what's never on social media, how much money we put into these applications for infrastructure. So since I've been in, we've done £50 million for additional infrastructure in Basildon in the last 2 years. So when everyone says, oh, we can't build because we haven't got the roads, we haven't got the GP surgeries and the schools, I've put £50 million in the bank account to be able to build all of them, right? But that never gets any coverage from the local press. I also think we're in a situation now where you will privately sit there, right? And again, I know some people don't think this because they see the toxicity on social media, right? I get on all right with most of the councillors, right? So, as leader of the council as well, they'll come to me if they've got particular issues with their casework or whatever, and they'll say, Gav, can you lean on someone to help me with it? And I will. Do you know what I mean? Sarah Shields, the reform councillor, pick the phone up, speak to her regularly. It's not. I don't care what your politics are. If you're in it for the right reasons, you want to help your residents, I'll be on the end of the phone to see what I can do to support you, right? And when you're sitting in the kind of the corridors waiting to go into these rooms, the Tories will sit there and they'll say to you, yeah, we need a local plan. They'll be like, it's quite a good application, this. And you'll be like, well, what are you going to do? Oh, we're going to vote against. The minute the camera goes on, we got no other choice. Got the Billericay Action Group up our arse. We're going to have to vote against.
Yeah.
And you're like, really? And they're like, yeah. And so what they're crying out for, and what I think the government should just do now, I think we are at a point now where the housing crisis in this country is so big, right? The delivery of 27,000 houses over the next 20 years in a borough like Basildon, as an example, I honestly believe the best thing we could do is create a development corporation. It's what we did when we had the new town. You look at the success of Canary Wharf, not that I'm trying to build tower blocks like Canary Wharf before anybody starts putting that on social media, right? But my point is, you have a development corporation that's got planning control, that has the ability to say, right, okay, these applications, this level of infrastructure, this is what's needed, this is what we're going to do. This piecemeal approach of an application for 300 here and 200 there and 100 here, all going onto a planning committee on a random Tuesday night in November, and some of it gets through and some of it doesn't, and some of it goes to appeal, and it costs the council hundreds of thousands of pounds further down the line. The system is just broken when it comes to that kind of stuff. And I can tell you now, councillors of all political parties are sat there going, someone come and take this off our plate. Someone come and do this for us. And I think if we want to have a serious grown-up conversation about housing, which it feels like in Basildon we are getting towards. I know we will always annoy people, particularly in the Billericay Action Group and others. Although I do give credit to people like Jim Devlin from Billericay, who him and I talk regularly, and he said to me, withdrawing the local plan in 2022 was a monumental mistake from the Conservatives. I know there are pledges to withdraw the local plan again from Reform and the Tories this time. It will be game over if that happens, and we will end up with 37,000 houses if the government gets its way and is able to take control. So I do think on housing, moving towards development corporations is right, because you're never going to get 7, 8, 9 councillors sat on a Tuesday night agreeing.
So to go back to the question, the crux of the question that I asked is that you've mentioned something there that the Conservatives wanted to get rid of the local plan, and they don't want it, but they don't want building.
Yeah.
The local plan protects from overbuilding.
Correct.
It was one of the contentious issues that I had when I was working with them years ago, and it seems like nothing has really changed in that regard.
Correct.
So I'm trying to understand why there's such a juxtaposition between we need houses, but we don't want to put the paperwork in place to get them, and yet they'll come out and oppose them. I'm struggling to understand the logic behind that, which is why I really...
But there isn't any, right? It's just pure stupidity. And it has been for years. We have not had a local plan in Basildon since 1998.
Is it stupidity or tribal?
Old. No, it's stupidity.
Is it just Gavin said something, therefore we've got to oppose it?
I wasn't here for 3 years. When they withdrew it last time, I wasn't even a councillor. If you are wanting to protect certain green spaces, if you are wanting to guarantee infrastructure in certain parts of the borough, you need a local plan. When people say to us, take for example the School Avenue estate in Langdon. There'll be some people watching that live on that estate. That estate was built, infrastructure was put in the bank, and it hasn't been delivered. Right? Case in point, bus service from that estate to Langdon Station every morning to stop people having to drive down a high road and park in the car park there. Never been delivered. Right? If we had a local plan and we were able to it's called the Community Infrastructure Levy, a SIL, and we were able to pull all of that money together, we would be able to use that for strategic transport in a different way. The Conservatives have got themselves into a very, very big mess on this. And I actually think they're going to get found out, because I think in the election, they're going to end up losing some of their safest seats to Reform, because they've created this beast, and they keep talking about Sadiq Khan every 10 minutes around, we're just building homes for Sadiq Khan. I know what they're doing. They're blowing the dog whistle, right, when they're saying that. And all they're doing is just piling up votes for Reform. That is not going to end up with votes on the Conservative pile on May the 7th. It is the art of stupidity. So instead of playing stupid games where they're trying to out-reform reform, which won't work, they should come to the table on housing and be serious about house building.
Let's talk about Reform, because they're obviously on the rise in the polls. They've been quite high in the polls, maybe not locally, but definitely nationally. They're riding high. They're the highest polling party in the country. What do you see happening if Reform UK take control of Basildon Council, which will have to be a coalition with the Conservatives due to the maths involved? Do you see that as, and I don't want you to be hyperbolic, is it catastrophic, bad, neither here nor there?
There's different parts to that question, right? So, firstly, they in the summer of 2025, they were at 34% in the polls. They have significantly dropped. They're down 10 points in the polls in the last year.
They're still highest though.
And they're high, but they're within the margin of error now of the other three, which would suggest that we've got four parties roughly on neck and neck, right? So then you're in a situation where you're looking at that, and it's different here. We haven't got a Green or a Liberal threat in our part of the world. So
Thank God.
It's going to be a Labour, Conservative and Reform three-way in a lot of these seats. They, from a personal point of view, I can't stand Reform, right? I cannot stand it, because we talked earlier on about conviction politician and authenticity. Nigel Farage couldn't give a shit about a place like Basildon. Couldn't give a shit, right? He could not care less about people living in Felmores, in Chalverdon, on the Red Brick Estate, on the Five Links in Alcatraz. They are not his people. He is not in politics to make their lives better. And the thing that annoys me more than anything else about them, I grew up in a working class household in Harold Hill in Romford. My dad went to work at the Co-op Bank in London, and then every evening he was a minicab driver. And he would do that until midnight. And at the weekends, he'd go out until 3-4 o'clock in the morning. My mum, she worked all of her life in the Bank of Ireland, and she went to work. When I turned 16, I was told by my family, you got to go and get yourself a job, right? You got to get your Saturday job. So I was working in Homebase on the Mayflower Retail Park, and I worked in the Tesco on Silver Island Way in Wickford. And I think back, we were taught as from 16 years old in a working class family that you've got to graft, you've got to work. So every single evening I was either going to school, playing rugby, or I was working, right? That was 7 days a week. That's what we did from the age of 16. Nigel Farage wants to convince working class people that life can just be really easy. That if you vote for Brexit, Johnny's going to get himself a council house. That if you stop all the boats, that you're all of a sudden going to walk into a £40,000, £50,000 a year job. It's bollocks. It's been proven to be bollocks. Brexit's been a disaster for the country. Immigration is higher now than it was before we left the EU. And this idea that all of our ills can be solved. He never, ever, ever talks, and you will never, ever hear a Reform politician talk about education. So what's the thing that's going to get people who are struggling and who are in poverty and for whom the cost of living crisis is still a real issue, and who get to the second week of the month and think, how the hell do I get to the end of the month with what I've got in the bank, right? For those people who I'm in politics for and the Labour movement is in politics for, what do they get out of voting for Reform? There's no answers on it. We're talking, and you've heard me already talk about creating a construction academy, looking at jobs and skills. What are we going to do when you leave school at 18? How are we going to help you get onto the property ladder, build a council house, get that stability locally, get better access to healthcare through the Eastgate or the Eastgate Hospital or the CDC in Pitsea. They're all the things I'm talking about. Education, health, jobs, skills, pathways. You never fucking hear that from Reform. And if I see one more video from a Reform candidate in this election walking around going, change, going to deliver change, vote for us and it's going to be change, but never tell you what any of this is, because there isn't going to be change. All these people are conservatives wearing a different colour rosette. And your point is exactly right, that if Reform win in Basildon next week, if they win seats like mine, like in Lee Chapel North, like in Pitsea, the only person who benefits from that is Andy Barnes and the Billericay Tories, who right now cannot believe their luck that enough people may be stupid enough to put them back in charge of Basildon Council after what they did to it for 25 years.
I do think that the Conservatives have played a good game with Sam Genet, because I believe...
But it's come at an expense, and I've heard this on the doorstep. Yeah. There are soft Conservatives, people who might class themselves as Cameron or Theresa May Conservatives, who are utterly appalled at the way in which the Billericay Tories have approached the last 9 months in local politics. So whilst it might end up with them getting back in, they will see a reduction in their vote.
I mean, I haven't seen an approach, so I don't really hear much about what the Conservatives in Basildon have to offer. I've not had a leaflet through my door. I don't see much of a presence online. Any social media presence that I see online from opposition parties to Labour, and these are people that I should naturally be inclined to vote for, neither party will get my vote. I just see personal attacks or accusations of corruption or a conspiracy theory, or one of the councillors, Sam Genet, playing the victim card when he can't win an argument in public, or if he can't win an argument inside the council. I guess what I want to ask you is, if they have nothing to offer and they win anyway, what is the point of you being so proactive, and what is the point of you having a group of individuals who want to make changes? Because I remember before, when you had plans to, build the arena and to build accommodation and to do all these other things that we opposed years ago, the Conservatives, I know how disappointing that was for you to lose the ability to do that. And now you might lose that ability again due to somebody going on Facebook every day going, vote for Reform, vote for change. And I haven't seen any prospect of a change, because I don't know what Reform UK in this town stands for. I've not seen one plan that I would get behind. I've not seen one piece of media online, literature through my door, which I think, wow, they've actually got a comprehensive agenda here. All I'm seeing is attacks. And if they do win, that's going to be based on nothing.
There's two versions on the ballot paper next week, right? Two versions of Basildon. There is the Reform version, which is to say that Basildon is broken, that it's broken beyond repair, that its council is corrupt, that everything is terrible, and that only these 30-year-old bearded incels are going to be able to come and change it. And then there is a version on the ballot paper that says Basildon is getting better. Mm-hmm. Your eyes don't lie to you. You can see it in your streets, in your communities, and in your town centre, and that you need to keep the faith with what we're doing. And we will see. My children will go off and do whatever they do in their lives, and they will travel all around the world, and they could end up living in whatever country or whatever part of the UK. Wherever they go, on their passport, it will always say, place of birth, Basildon. And I want that to mean something to them, and I want that to be a positive. I don't want it to be something, mine says Havering. Doesn't really mean anything to me, if I'm being honest with you. And I don't want it to be a source of shame that they are associated with having been born in Basildon. I want them to be proud of it. And I think that we have an opportunity to fundamentally change the fate and fortune of Basildon. And that's why I do believe this election is so important this year. right? Because it is now or never. You asked me a question earlier on about why would it be so catastrophic if reform won. I can tell you those investors who are lined up to invest their money in Basildon walk away next Friday.
Tell people how much money's on the table.
£1.5 billion. So they walk away next Friday. You cannot run around saying that an organisation is corrupt, it's full of incompetence, it's terrible, blah, 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 and then turn around and say, but if you could give me £150 million so I can build this out and we can do this and we can make this better, and oh, by the way, give me another 300 million over here so that we can improve. No investor is going to look at that and go, yeah, that's someone we want to do business with. So the public rhetoric you hear from Sam Genet and Reform UK kills regeneration, kills it dead.
This is something that I don't like, because I remember when he first came on the local political scene, and I did want to help him. I did want to advise him because there was something in him that reminded me of me, actually.
Gobshite.
Passionate, I would say. But the difference between my campaign and his campaign is that I actually had ideas that, you know, rightly or wrongly, they were there for everyone to read and judge. I have not seen an idea yet from him. And I don't like the negative approach to the politics, because I'm just seeing attack. And people that don't necessarily follow politics online, they might go on Facebook and they'll see one of your videos come up responding to Sam. They'll see a video of Sam criticising you for something, and these people don't even follow you both. And they're saying that we want more from local politics. We don't want to see this all the time. We want to see ideas and solutions.
There is so much bollocks that comes out of Reform UK in Basildon, right? That I don't follow it. I get shown it by the comms team or by other councillors or whatever. And you almost have to have a matrix where you sit there and you think, okay, unless this is a 9 or a 10, I'm not going to respond to it and we're just going to leave it. So literally 80% of the stuff that comes out, we just don't even reply to. But then there are some things that go out there. I mean, apparently we own a hotel in Sunderland because I support the football team. I mean, I was there last Friday looking around for this hotel that we apparently
just make
own.
a note. So I'm getting a free gaff in Dubai to stay in.
And one of my friends.
And I'm going to be getting a hotel room in Sunderland when I don't go and watch your football team.
Penthouse suite in a hotel.
Lovely, I'll take that.
That we apparently own in Sunderland. So you sit and you think, surely no one's believing any of this stuff. And then you'll go and you'll knock on the door or something and be like, what's all this about this hotel in Sunderland?
Yeah.
And you're like, what? And they're like, oh, I've seen it. And you're thinking, really? And so it permeates through.
Yeah.
And that's what Reform are relying on locally. And you're absolutely right. You know, if you vote for Reform next week, you are going to get a Conservative leader. You are going to get fortnightly bins. You are going to get the streetlights turned off. You are going to see regeneration killed on day one. And you're going to see the local plan withdrawn that's going to open up every bit of green space for new housing to be put on it. That is a fact. You haven't seen anything on any Reform leaflet about anything remotely local. As a councillor, I am the most powerful councillor in Basildon, right? As the leader of the council, I can't do anything to stop the boats.
No, of course not.
There is not a single thing that I can do to stop the boats, right? And I can't cut national insurance or income tax. So when I see these Reform leaflets talking about how they're going to cut taxes, but they're not talking about council tax apparently, they're talking about national taxes, right? And they're going to stop the boats. What the hell does that have to do with Basildon Council? The answer is the square root of sod all, right? We can't affect any of that stuff. So if you want to end up with a tour, if you want to end up in a situation where your borough is going backwards again, then yeah, vote for Reform next week. But if you actually think that there might be reasons to believe, as Bruce Springsteen would say, right, and there might be an opportunity here to actually change the fate and fortune and the narrative about Basildon, the arena being, as an example, the biggest indoor event space anywhere in the East of England region, to attract lots of new visitors and people and ideas to come into Basildon, right, for the first time ever. If you think that might be a future worth taking a punt on, rather than the negativity, rather than the doomsday scenario that you hear from Reform all the time, you can vote for Labour next week. And yeah, you might have to hold your nose and you might have to think, I can't stand what's going on nationally and I'm not a fan of the Prime Minister. But my argument to you would be, Keir Starmer he may not be gone in 6 months' time, right? Are you prepared to throw away a once-in-a-generation chance to regenerate your town centre for somebody who might not be here in 6 months? And who, by the way, I can tell you, will not be sat there on Friday morning next week looking at it going, oh, we lost Basildon. Gav's gone.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's not going to affect the Prime Minister one iota whether Basildon Council's got Andy Barnes back leading it with Sam Janae propping him up.
Well, I'm sure he'd like for you to keep it.
Well, I'm sure he would, and I'm sure if I text him on Friday morning or he texts me and he asked me what the result was and how it all went, we'll have a candid conversation. He's already written to me last week asking me to come up to number 10 for a discussion with him about the campaign. So I'm sure he would. But my point is, Basildon voting for reform doesn't end Keir Starmer, right? That's not the end of Keir Starmer because of what happens here.
But your
it is the end of the regeneration.
Yeah, so that's your pitch. Yeah. It won't end Keir, but it will end the regeneration of the town. I do want to talk about the regeneration of the town because I think that's a really important component of your legacy as the leader of Basildon Council. But I want to stay on Sam just for one more question, and I want to know what it is about him in particular that gets under your skin. Because I believed back when I was campaigning, I don't want to make this whole interview about comparing my campaign with the current one, but it's my experience with you, is that I believed that we ran a very, very passionate campaign back in the day, but it didn't cause a rift between us personally. I would actually say that during that campaign, we developed a mutual respect for each other more so than before. And I think off the back of that, we've become friends. And even though our politics are on opposite ends of the spectrum,
opposites attract, Charlie.
Opposites attract. That might have to be the name of this. We never got to the point where it was like doing videos about each other and it becoming like the talk of the town about why is he responding to this and why is he doing that. Maybe just in a sentence, what is it about Sam that gets under your skin so much?
But it's easy to answer, right? I can get on with people from any political party. As I said, I could get on with Sarah Shields in Reform if you're in it for the right reasons. So if you are in it to make Basildon a better place, if you are in it to do your casework and to work hard, then yeah, 100% I'll do it. To give you an example of what I'm talking about, since July of last year, Sam Janae has done 21 pieces of casework.
Wow. Okay.
Right?
Compare and obviously, just so people are aware of this, like this isn't you saying this. People can actually ask the council about what he's actually done. So it's all FOI-able. Yeah.
So he's done 21 pieces of casework that relate to individuals and residents. I've done 1,700. Right? Most councillors are into the hundreds in terms of what they've done. So my point is, if you think that being a councillor is just about going on social media, going into full council meetings. Again, right, I'll give you another example of it. Last night, the council has taken a massive step towards the regeneration of the town by acquiring the Eastgate Shopping Centre. Right? Yeah. It is a huge, huge deal for the council. Sam turned up at the meeting, tries to interrupt the meeting, shouting and screaming, which I don't allow him to do in cabinet meetings. There's a button that you can just press that cuts everybody off, so I did. He realised after hitting it for about 3 minutes that it wasn't going to turn back on. And then he decided, well, I'm going to get up and leave then. So he didn't stay and listen to the expert from Montague Evans, who was there. Bearing in mind, it's in his ward as well, right? The expert from Montague Evans to sit there and talk about the regeneration opportunity. The Section 151 finance officer to sit there and talk about the risks that might be involved and the mitigations that the council has worked on. The legal officer to sit there and say how this is all legal and what we're doing. The assistant director for Regen to talk about the wider social impact of what we're doing. The cabinet to ask. He didn't listen to any of that. Was not interested in any of it. It was all performative. It was all, I'm going to put a button on, I'm going to shout and scream and interrupt for 3 minutes, I'm going to clip it up for Facebook, and then I'm going to do a post saying you're all bent, you're all corrupt, and you're all spending money recklessly. I have fuck all time for that. If you are not a serious player and you are not going to come to the table and engage in the detail, you don't get my time.
No, I think that's fair enough. I mean, at the end of the day, I think people come into local politics and being around many politicians over the years, whether it be, former prime ministers, maybe the next prime minister. There's some people that I run around with that I talk to sometimes, and I think to myself, how serious are you? There isn't anything in some of these people that are, quote unquote all powerful, which makes me think, wow, you really should have been given, the throne and been put in Buckingham Palace for life and restore of the monarchy to its, former powerful glory. Like, there's none of that I see in some politicians, and I think even though local politics isn't as impactful as national, it does play a massive role in the life of the town.
But you can always tell, right? I've been in politics 15 years,
Yeah.
nationally and locally, the same as you, right? You can always tell a politician, whether they're serious or not, by whether or not they can sit here and talk about policy. If they can't talk about policy, they haven't thought enough about why they're doing it. And again, I come back to my point. What have you seen from Reform UK or the Conservatives in this election that is about local policy? The answer's nothing.
When you look at the borough as a physical place, you mentioned that you've made a strategic acquisition of the Eastgate Shopping Centre. I won't ask how much that cost because I don't know if you're allowed to tell me yet. But I believe that will be a good investment for the council. You've got Marks and Spencer's coming back to the town. You've got Aldi moving in as well into the town. What's one thing that has been built in Basildon, is being built or is future planned, that would never have happened if you weren't leader?
All of it.
The Tories will take credit for the cinema. But if we just concede for the sake of conversation that they're going to take that one, we'll chalk that up to the Conservatives. Everything else in the town,
they've opposed everything. They opposed the acquisition of the Eastgate. They've opposed the M&S, which we're looking to turn into that box park type facility with the podcast, the music studios, and the office space above it. They opposed the Orwell development. I tried to explain this on the podcast the other day. In 2024, I went to something called UK Reef, which is a big conference where you get all of the kind of retail and real estate and all of these guys in a room. It's kind of like the UK version of MIPIM, which is a big conference in the south of France. And I said to all these big boys, the M&S's of this world, and all that, what do I have to do to get you to come to Basildon? And they said there's two things. They said, number one, you have to drastically increase footfall after 4 p.m. So they said it falls off a cliff. So they said the quickest and easiest way to prove that you can increase the footfall is to invest in food and beverage. So they said if you can do that, one, it shows that people have got disposable income that they're willing to go and spend, and two, it shows that they will come out after 4 p.m. and do it. The second thing they said was your buildings that you have they're not modern, they're full of asbestos. The service yards that service the stock and all the rest of it are not in great condition. And it's very tired, and as a consequence of that, it makes it a more complicated, expensive facility for us to go to. So if you knock them down and you rebuild modern, fit-for-purpose retail units, we'll be interested in coming to talk to you. So in the last year, we've opened the sushi and burger company, we've opened the creams, we've opened the Weatherspoons, Maria's Cafe opened as well. We've seen
the last two in particular have been quite big hits. I mean, I've eaten in Maria's, and the Weatherspoons is rarely empty, if ever empty. I've not seen it empty since it opened, actually, to be quite honest. I was there last
night, it was still busy. And we've seen a 13% increase in footfall across the town centre in just 1 year.
How do you measure that?
So on all the buildings, they've got all of these pedometers. They're measuring all the time. So they're able to track that. So they've seen a 13% increase. That has sparked M&S Food and Boots and others to say, yeah, we'll go back into the Eastgate. So they're looking to be part of the hospital when that opens. You're going to have 175,000 additional visits with the hospital in the town centre. So all of that is building towards how we get bigger retailers to come back in. The Orwell development that is going up, there are 9 commercial units underneath that, but you can play around with that. So actually, if you wanted a bigger store, so if we got an M&S Clothing or whatever, you can make it into 6.
How many properties are being put in that Orwell development?
492.
Okay, so you got 492. If you assume that is, the minimum amount of residents, they're going to go downstairs and look around the town anyway, especially if there's things to do. So that development there, did that play a key role in bringing the £1.5 billion investment into the town?
Yeah, so again, that development, we looked at buying that building. People will remember that had the Lloyds in it, the subway and the Moon on the Square. That was that block we're talking about. We looked at buying it, but it was owned by an absentee pension fund. So again, right, back in 2019 when I came back and I said, I want to do regeneration. I want that to be the thing we really go at. Within Basildon Town Centre, there were 55 different landowners. Basildon Council owned the council office, it owned the Towngate Theatre, and it owned what is now the cinema. That was it. It did not own any other buildings in the town.
Just to be clear, when you say the cinema, do you mean just the cinema or the Nando's next door,
Yeah,
or
that
Little
block.
Lounge and that
Yeah,
whole
yeah.
and
That block.
Does that extend back all the way to Toys R Us?
No, it
that
ends
strip
at
building
Cream.
there?
No, it ends at Cream.
Okay.
So the rest of that is London and Cambridge after that. So we, from our point of view, that's all we owned. That doesn't give you a lot of power and a lot of sway. So what then happens is you start looking at what could we buy up and what could we do with it. And everything is about value to investors. How much are they going to get on their return? And again, to give you an example of what I mean by that, the Westgate Shopping Centre, I don't think I can name the individual, right? But there was a certain individual who is well known for bargain, cheap, tatty retail. He may or may not have once owned Newcastle United. But this individual wanted to buy the Westgate Shopping Centre, just fill it with bargain basement rubbish. Now, on the one hand, people will look at it and go, well, it opens up the stores and it gets people in the town centre and all the rest of it. But the knock-on effect of that is that opposite it is the Orwell development, where we have attracted £172 million of private sector money from the Canadian pension fund Starlight. So not a penny of taxpayer money is going into building that. That is entirely a private venture. Those same guys are now wanting to look at where they can start building out next. So can they help us with the M&S? Could they help us with Southgate House? Could they help us with the Eastgate? So we've gone about creating that confidence. And the reason I say that is these guys are looking at it going, well, the council has acquired that building and that building and that building. It's now in control of BTCM, the Town Centre Management Group. They're serious about land assembly. They're serious about wanting to regenerate the town.
Yeah.
That gives us the confidence to invest. And that's what we're seeing.
Talk me through how you get a deal like this over the line, because if you put £1.5 billion on this table in pound notes, I mean, it would fill up the room. It's an unfathomable amount of money for a town which most people write off. And I think that's unfair. So when you say you've got £1.5 billion on the table, that isn't, a couple of $100,000 for a new firm opening up. That isn't, a startup business. When you go into these kinds of meetings, how do you organise them, first of all? How much pressure do you feel when you're in those types of meetings talking about that kind of money? And how many hurdles have you had to jump over to get that investment? Because I can't imagine that was easy to get.
So it's a poncy word, right? But it's all about a vision. So you have to be really clear about what you envisage Basildon could look like and be in 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years time. We've spent an awful long time thinking about what is it that we could offer in Basildon that nowhere else in Essex, nowhere else in the east of England can offer. So clearly, Chelmsford has done well with a John Lewis, and that is attracting people to go up to Chelmsford, and the whole Bond Street development is very nice, and people go up there to shop. Southend has got the Cliffs Pavilion, and the Cliffs does very well, and they do a lot of trade out of that as a consequence of that. Thurrock has always had Lakeside, and that's been the thing that's attracted people there. Basildon's kind of just been forgotten about in the middle. It's been the place that you pass through to get to all of those places, but no one's spending any of their money here. So the first thing you have to do is then go, right, okay, we're in the middle. but this is what we want to achieve. So the arena was the big thing. That was the game changer. No one else has got that. That's the thing that we could really put us on the map. So then the next test is to go and find out, can it work economically? So you have to do all of the economic analysis. So you bring in the consultants that everyone hates, but you bring them in, they do that work, they look at it. They advised us originally to go for 5,000. Then when the analysis came back and said, actually, your sweet spot is 3,500. I think Cliff's is 2,000. This would be almost double that, but it would have so much more flexibility that it can be used for the darts, the boxing, as well as for live entertainment. It could also be conference and exhibition space, pantomimes, all that sort of stuff. It can do it all, which makes it a unique space in Essex. So then when you know you've got the economic analysis, you're not barking up the wrong tree with something pie in the sky. You put that whole pitch together, and then you go out. And so we've held days in London with, again, lots of these people in real estate who are looking for opportunities all the time. We are well serviced by our C2C rail, getting us in and out of London so quickly. That's a major plus. The 127 and the A13, I know there's lots of traffic on them, but they are well serviced into London and as well. And then clearly with the Lower Thames crossing coming, as well as the two airports that we have in Essex, all of those things make connectivity a plus for you as well. So you just have to put all of that together. But then you have to go and sell Basildon, and you have to go and say, this is a new town. I say to people all the time, we are a baby, right? But look at what we have achieved as a baby. Depeche Mode, right? Global artists from Basildon. The underwater cameras that David Attenborough uses for the Blue Planet, made in Basildon. The optronic equipment being used by the UK and NATO allies when they're out in the field, made in Basildon. Ford Motors and the electronics behind the EVs, made in Basildon. All of that positive stuff that we do here. Come and be part of that next chapter. Come and build a home for the people that are going to be on that journey with us. So you create that excitement for people, and it can't just be about bricks and mortar. It is about, there's a reality that Basildon right now has got a reputation that perhaps is not one that we are all massively proud of. Come and help us fix it. Don't go where it's easy. I'm a politician. People, sometimes, I've been asked if I would stand for Parliament, right? And so you kind of sit there and say, so what seat would I go for then? And they name something. I sit there and I think, it's got to be so boring to be the MP for that. I like it where it's a bit gritty and it's a bit raw, and that's what Basildon is, right? And I say that. I use that kind of my political experience with these investors to say, you're going to, not only are you going to get a return on your investment in terms of your pound and pence, but what happens if Basildon starts to become seen as the place to go? What happens if, I grew up in Chadwell Heath, and up the road was Hackney and Mile End and Stratford. You'd never have gone there. And now, because of the Olympics and the legacy and all the rest of it, it's brilliant. And everyone wants to live in Stepney, and everyone wants to live around Wapping. You wouldn't have gone near those places when I was a kid growing up. Well, what happens if we do that in Basildon? What happens if actually this becomes the capital of Essex and people start coming back here and say, because...
But it already is the capital economically.
We've got the biggest economy on the Thames Estuary after Canary Wharf. So again, people in our borough, we need to play that more. We've got a bigger economy than Thurrock, bigger than Southend, bigger than Chelmsford, bigger than Colchester. Our population is the biggest in South Essex, bigger than Southend, bigger than Thurrock.
And that'll be a draw for investors, the amount of people.
Absolutely. And the thing again that I say to them is, wealth comes into this borough at 9 o'clock in the morning and works in all of our high paid jobs, and then it disappears again at 5 o'clock in the evening to all these neighbouring towns because it hasn't got anywhere to go and spend its money. And again, part of the analysis that gets done on things like the arena is they look at it and they say, well, hang on a minute, actually, we could be having that money being spent here after work. Or, it annoys me when I drive around these industrial estates that we've got and I see like Phoenix House as an example, and I'm not picking on the people that work there, right? But it's an office block in the middle of an industrial estate near the Mayflower Retail Park. And you see at lunchtime all the people leaving Phoenix House walking down to the Sainsbury's at Netherden, crossing over the road to go and get lunch. And I'm thinking, you should be in the town centre. You should be buying your coffees before work. You should be buying your lunch in the M&S food box park type facility. You should be going for a drink after work. You should be waiting for your partner to go and see a show at the arena. It's not rocket science, this, right? This is what happens in town centres.
How did you propose it? I mean, I wouldn't know who to call to organise investment of that size. when it comes to choosing, who helps you choose? Is this you mentioned a word earlier, vision, which you called Ponzi. I don't think it's Ponzi, but
the
you know,
word,
you do have a vision, and I'm curious to know like how much of your future vision for Basildon is yours, collaborative, with officers in the council, with your councillors, maybe even your wife who's also on the council. Where do those ideas come from?
So it's a good question, right? Because a lot of the time when you're coming up with these policies, I think sometimes people think that it's the officers who are coming up with the ideas. It isn't. It has to be driven by the politicians. That is our job. So again, I describe it, maybe this is not the right way to do it, but politics is a drug and I am an addict, right? So all day, every day, I am consuming news. I'm reading what's going on in local government. I'm looking at other parts of the country to think, that's a good idea, or I wouldn't do that, or maybe that might work in Basildon if we did it like this. So I think about that stuff all the time. It comes back to that point I said about Reform and the Tories earlier on. I think really deeply about this stuff. I don't just come off on a whim. And as I said, I test out ideas all of the time. I'm doing it on this podcast now. I'm saying things that I'm thinking through. I'll look back on this to see how it all works and what the reaction is. That's what you have to do as a leader of the council. And you've got to bring people with you. So my cabinet is made up of people who are in a very similar situation to me. They are either young parents who are raising their children here, or they've got grandparents. They are grandparents and they're raising their grandkids here. And they're people who work in a whole range of different industries and sectors. I haven't just got a bunch of 60-plus retirees sitting around the cabinet table, which, again, you could have in a week's time.
I know you want to take pot shots at the opposition.
But my point is that there's a reason we got to this point in Basildon, right?
Yeah.
There's a reason the town centre looks like it does, because we didn't have enough diverse talent sat round the cabinet table thinking through, well, what does the future need to look like? It's not about preserving the status quo. It's about shaping the future. And that's what I hope my cabinet, not just this time, but the last time I was in as well, I hope that people can see that we do come up with ideas, that we are putting forward plans. And then there's another side to it, which, I don't know how much you want to get into on it, which is you then need an officer corps who are going to deliver it.
Well, you need that, obviously, for them to be on side. Do you find that when you present ideas to the officers in the council that there's objections, there's always... Because I've always heard stories about how the civil service and national government are generally quite cautious in their approach to everything, which is why people accuse national government of being slow off the mark. Do you have the same issue locally?
Yeah, look, your mate Liz Truss, right? I don't agree with her on an awful lot, but I think she was right in the sense that civil service reform is a badly needed thing, right? Now, I caveat everything I'm about to say by saying that we have got some excellent, hard-working officers who live in this borough, are passionate about this borough. They turn up every day to work wanting to do a good job. When you get to a certain level within local authority as an officer, it's called a political appointment, right? So if you are an assistant director or a chief executive, you have to go through an appointment panel of politicians. So you'll do all of the recruitment process, you do the competency tests, you do all of those sorts of things. And then you come and you sit in front of a cross-party appointment panel. And we will ask you various questions, and then your appointment will either be confirmed by that political appointment panel, and if the politicians say no, then they don't get the job. And if you're a statutory officer, which means a chief exec, the chief finance officer, or the chief legal officer, that will go to full council, and all 42 councillors will have a vote on that. To get to that point in your career, you've also got to be a bit of a politician, right?
Right.
So you've got to be able to play both sides and to understand the political dynamics at play. What you tend to find in councils is that you have some councils that are described as officer-led authorities, and you have some that are called member-led authorities. And I would suggest to you that in Basildon, for 20-odd years, we had an officer-led council. And what I mean by that is the leader of the council and the cabinet would come in maybe once a week for an update from the chief executive and their portfolio holders, their portfolio leads, and they'd get a briefing to say, these are all the things we're working on, and they'd sit there and go, okay, well, we're happy with that, we're not happy with that, think about this, think about that, and then they would depart the scene and leave. Mm-hmm. That gives the officers the ability to then just do what they like in terms of how they're running the council, the rest of it. My view was that what that led to in Basildon was a town centre that looks the way ours does, and a service that is detached from the residents too much. I used to describe Basildon Council as becoming an island off of its public. So even though the public were wanting more out of its council, it was getting less and it was communicating even less. I lead a member-led council. What that means is I'm in the room, so I have an office at the council. There was no leader's office before I turned up. There was no physical place for the leader of the council to even sit and work. So I have an office there that the cabinet use as well. All of my cabinet members are in the council 2 or 3 days a week, meeting with their officers. And it's that thing about creating pace and momentum all of the time.
Is that your dictation, or do they come in off their own will?
No, that's an expectation I have of the cabinet, that they will be able to do that. And I'm on them the whole time, asking them questions about where they're up to on certain things. And there are some officers that don't enjoy that. And there are some officers that are of the view that actually we want to go to a member-led, an officer-led authority where members are too involved.
So let me push on that, because you mentioned earlier on that there are lots of officers which work hard, that play the game the way you want it being played. But I dare say that many of them were there under the Conservatives when they've been in control, and you would also suggest that those administrations were officer-led. Mm-hmm. So which one is it?
Yeah, but those officers now have to decide. They have to make a decision about whether or not they are going to get on board with the new way of working and start delivering. And there are many officers for whom that has happened, right? And they're taking our right. So again, one of the things that I will do, and if I'm successful next week, is on the following Monday, the cabinet, all of the directors will be in a room and we will have a presentation, and I will say really clearly, these are the things I want you to deliver in Q1 this year, right? And I expect them to be done, and then these are the dates I want them to go to cabinet. These are the dates I want the CMDRs, the cabinet decisions, to be taken, and these are the allocations in terms of funding that I want you to find and make happen. Some officers don't like that. And you'll find that there will be some officers that will sit there and say, we're not doing that, or they'll try and put blockages in, or they'll kick it into the long grass. We won't make that cabinet meeting, councillor. It will be in this 6 months' time or whatever. I have a thing that I say to officers, right? There are only 2 reasons that you can say no to me. One is if it's illegal, and one is if it will bankrupt the council. If it is if neither of them apply, get on with it.
What if they don't?
Then there's discussions that can be had. There are 300 odd councils if they want to go and work for any of the others.
The reason why I asked that question is because of what you said earlier on about officer-led councils, which to me implies that there is some contempt for certain politicians in that building, hence why they don't do what is asked of them previously. Do you as a council lead have the ability to say X, Y, Z officers have not done what I asked by Q1, therefore I want them on review, I want them fired, I want them gone? Do you have the authority to get rid of staff inside the council? So
the way it would work, I always use football analogies, right? Because I think it's a simple way to communicate. Sunderland signed a striker a few years ago, right, called Josie Altidore. We had to nickname him Dozy Altidore, right, because he couldn't put the ball in the back of the net. To the point where we actually started to feel sorry for him, right? And what I mean by that is, if I sign a striker and we're 10 games in and he hasn't scored and he keeps missing sitters, I'm going to have to change the striker, aren't I? Right? Because if I don't, we're going to find ourselves not winning games and we might end up getting relegated, and that's, catastrophic. Every single day you are the leader of the council, you are closer to the end, right?
Now that is a Tony Blair quote.
But that is the truth of it, right? Yeah. Every single day you're in office, you are closer to the end. So you have to make every single day count, and you can't waste time. You can't be sat there saying, we'll push that on for 6 months, or if it's a priority and you want it delivered, it's got to be delivered. And then what your chief executive has to do is he has to manage. He's called the head of paid service. That's his legal title. he or she has to then say, okay, sorry, you're not performing, performance review. The leader and the cabinet members, they're asking for this. It hasn't happened. We're going to have to look at this. We're going to have to look at that. And that's why you see at that level, a lot of those senior officers, they move on. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's fine. Sometimes the personalities don't match up. Sometimes, if you're, say, for example, you're an officer in Basildon right now and maybe digital and all of that is your big thing. Well, it's not a priority because our priority is regeneration and council house building. That's what we're saying. We want you laser focused on delivering. So I can accept that if you're a director, you might sit there and think, well, I'm not really getting as much hearing off the cabinet as I would if I went to a council that's doing a really big digital investment strategy or whatever. Fine. If I get that. Professionally, you want to do well and you want to be able to put on your CV you've delivered things. You're not going to get stuff through in Basildon because it's not the priority. You want to go somewhere else. Those conversations happen a lot with officers at that senior level as well. And as I said, they're politicians. They understand it. They can see it. They can smell it. They know if things do and don't happen on their watch. But the other thing that really kills this council, and it is a major problem, is this election in thirds. Having elections every year is a disaster. And the sooner that goes with local government reorganisation, the better.
Even someone who's keen on it, I get confused by it sometimes. I just think, imagine what the voters are thinking that are just trying to, they get the polling card come through and they think, oh, there's a vote on again.
But look at how ridiculous this is, right? So 14 seats are up next week in Basildon. The Conservatives and Reform could form an administration. In 12 months' time, they could be out.
Sure.
Yeah. So in the next year, we lose all of that investment. We don't build those council houses. We've got another year's worth of people in temporary accommodation, each costing the council £27,000 a year. And then what happens in a year's time? We come back and say, Gav, do you want to go again? Fourth term, Gav, or fifth term, Gav, or whatever it might be. It's lunacy. And in the end, I could keep those investors at the table because everybody knew Labour were going to win the last election, right, with the polling. So when it came to the all-out elections in 2024, everybody knew Labour was going to be the largest party on that council. I could keep the investors at the table. You can't do it now. They won't come back for a third time. And that's, again, the danger we're facing next week. So
elections in thirds. You've been leader 3 times, 3 different stints. The first time was in 2017, then 19, then 2024. Each time that you've been in power, what have you learned from each time? If you could take one piece of golden advice that you were going to give to, say, somebody who wants to get involved in local politics, one piece of advice from each one of your terms.
Well, I got elected when I was 23 in 2012. So I've grown up on the council. I'm almost a 40-year-old man now. Do you know what I mean? I've grown up on the council, so I've seen a lot of changes and been through it as well. When I got the leadership in 2017, even though I'd been a councillor at that point for 5 years, I didn't have a clue how it worked. I did not have a clue how the council worked. So I got played like a fiddle by officers. And it took me about 6 months to really get my head around what was going on. So that whole machinery that exists behind the council in terms of, as I described earlier on, there isn't one lever that I can pull to just get something done. I've probably got 10 levers on my desk, and my job is to just know which ones to tap a little bit at different times in order to keep the whole thing moving and going. I didn't have a clue how any of that worked. So I wasted about 6 months in my first term, and it was only then when I was like, okay, I need to change the structure. I need to bring in new people. You then have to go for a lengthy recruitment process, and by the time I did that, we got to March, and then it was election time. I didn't think we would get control back until 2020. We got it back a year earlier than I expected us to. But in that year, between 2018 and 2019, again, I thought long and hard about what is it that I was going to do. And for me, it was about the regeneration and about really wanting to motor with the regeneration. So I knew that the very first conversation I had on the very first day with the chief executive was all about how we're going to do the regen and make that happen. the lesson I learned in that second term was that I went far too quickly. So although I was having to run at pace in order to get the investors and the private sector on board with it and saying, right, okay, yeah, coming out of COVID, Basildon's the place we're going to invest. Look at the ideas this guy's got. We want to get behind him. And I had all those guys ready to rock and roll and put their money on the table. Joe Public was sitting there going, hang on a minute, what's going on here? We haven't had any regeneration here for 20 odd years. The town's a shithole. When you're telling us that all of this is suddenly going to appear and we're going to have an arena here and we're going to have this and we're going to have that, not a chance. It's pie in the sky. It's this, it's that, and all the rest of it. And I didn't bring the public with me and explain it well enough as to what all of the benefits were and the different stages in that process. This time, coming back, again, I think we've tried to learn from that. Tony Blair always says that the irony, I know it sounds like a Tony Blair tribute, this, right? But Blair always says that you are you're most popular when you are your worst leader, and you are your least popular when you are the best version of the leader. I've been the leader for 5 years now. I look around that council, there is nobody, not even on the Conservative side, that has led the council longer than I have led the council. Phil did 3 years, Phil Turner, Baggett did 3 years or 4 years. I've done 5 now. And from my perspective, I don't feel there's anybody else in that building who could run the council and deliver on the things that we're delivering. Obviously, that's a judgment for the public to make next week. But my lesson here, or the thing that I think, is that we are probably at a stage with all of this where we've got a team that have taken us now to a point where we are. But if we are now going to motor and we're really going to get the arena over the line, we're really going to get things moving in another direction, we're going to need additional help to make that happen. And I've got ideas and plans for how we will deliver that and make that happen. But obviously that is all subject to the results next week.
As you come into the final stretch of this campaign, which really puts Basildon on a fork in the road, we can go that way to nowhere or your way to Damascus. Nicely put, right? How do you deal with putting this vision to the public and having constant social media comments accusing you of X, Y, and Z? I mean, I'll go back to that because I think that in the modern age, social media campaigning is so prevalent and ultimately very important to winning a campaign now that you can't go a day without having people leave comments on social media pages. This is more of a fun question, to be fair. What comments do you see most often? Which ones do you just roll your eyes at? And which comments have actually gotten under your skin?
Yeah, I mean, look, I remember going back to 2012, working on the Barack Obama campaign in Ohio, right? When Facebook was seen as this brilliant tool in order to get mums living at a certain mile radius from a nursery at risk of closure, getting them messages about how we're going to come together, community organise in order to save the nursery. It is not that today. It has morphed into something quite different. I think the other thing as well, lots of people who work in social media will understand this, but from my perspective, whether it's on a Sunday or on a Monday, I will schedule posts on my Facebook. So they'll go out throughout the week. I am not physically sitting there posting this post at 8 o'clock in the morning and then this one at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's all scheduled, right? So there's content, whatever that means, that is going out.
That is a Ponzi word.
That is a Ponzi word.
Yeah.
But the messages, the ideas that I want to get across, that I think, right, this week I want to focus in on what we're doing in Northlands Park and the investment we're making in our outdoor areas or whatever. I'll say, right, I'm going to schedule those things. So I'm not sitting there looking at all of this because, again, as I've just explained to you on this podcast, I'm in the council most of the day. I've then got like reading material up here that I've got to get through.
My old leaflets, hopefully.
Obviously, yeah. And
toilet paper.
Your WhatsApp messages telling me what I'm doing wrong. all of this stuff that I've got to sit there and go through.
Honest feedback.
I haven't got time to be in the comment section. And if I open my phone now, I've not had my phone on for about an hour. There will just be hundreds of notifications, right? Yeah. I couldn't tell you. And then some people are like, "You're not answering my question." I think, where the fuck's your question? Like, on what post is this? Where is it? Like, email me if you want me to answer questions or whatever. But the narrative, the way in which I'm described or whatever, I can't control what other people say about me. And there's some people out there who think I'm doing a good job. There are some people out there who think I'm the devil incarnate, and that they will never see past that. I would hope that most people think that I'm accessible, more accessible than any of my predecessors in terms of the work I do to communicate what the council is up to. I hope people think I'm authentic. I've survived the Corbyn era because I wasn't a Corbynista, and I think the public, I won the council during the Corbyn era. So when I hear people say, "Oh, you're never going to survive the Farage era," I think, I did it 10 years ago. I did it during the Corbyn era. This is not new, what we're seeing today from Reform UK. From my perspective, I know I'm not going to be able to change that tiny minority's opinion who are on there every day slagging me off. In terms of the things that get under my skin, I think it's more when people, they make comments about, listen, people say you're taking brown envelopes. I mean, every day, if I was taking brown envelopes, I would have free housing in Dubai and I would have this and all the rest of it. It just doesn't happen. There isn't a way for councillors to do that. It's just utter rubbish that people put out. It's when people start almost commenting, as if like they know you. So like they know your motives and be like, "Gav doesn't believe that. He thinks this." And you've never fucking met me. I can't get my head around this. My dad had a situation a few years back where he was on the train from Wickford to Liverpool Street in the morning, and he was sat next to this guy, and he was just looking at his phone, and he could see that the guy was on my Facebook page.
Right.
And he's sending me a volley of abuse, this guy. And I think the guy realised that my dad had clocked what he was doing. So started saying, "Have you seen this idiot, this Councillor Callaghan going on slagging me up?" To which my dad was like, "So what are you doing?" He was like, "Well, I'm telling him what I think." My dad was like, "Have you ever met him?" He was like, "No." And in the end, my dad was like, "That's actually my son that you're slagging off there." And like, he's 30 years old. Like, what are you doing? You are a grown man. Like, why are you sat on a train at 8 o'clock in the morning sending misery to a 30-year-old kid you've never met?
I mean, to be fair, you are in a position of authority where you should expect criticism.
But what? Yeah.
Unless it was abusive unnecessarily, then.
But I get it. All right, I get it. But send me an email. Come to
my
surgery. Come to my Meet the Leader event. Like, again, I love all this. There's so many people. I won't name them because it will embarrass them. But
name them.
James reckons they're on social media constantly. The lawyers will have a go at me for saying that. But on my social media, he's this. He's the worst person I've ever met. He's the. Never met the guy.
Yeah.
Right. But then in my private messages, nice as pie to me. Could you confirm whether or not I'm able to attend your Meet the Leader event on Friday? Of course you are. Yeah, come along. Never turns out. And then what you find is that a lot of these people, and I go to the Wetherspoons every Saturday night, right? I don't think I've ever had any trouble in there. I've never had anybody come up. So all this bunny that I get on social media, actually, if people are sat across the table, you haven't got to agree with everything.
To be fair with you, I mean, I've been out with you a couple of times in the Wetherspoons, and people are sending you drinks to the table. I mean, albeit someone did send you a tomato juice, which I found quite strange. But nonetheless, you were sent drinks.
I was with Doc Cotton at the time.
Yeah, pints of Guinness and everything else. Like, you were being, I've never been, and it's the same when, you hear about people in politics proper that will say, "Oh, Gavin's this and Gavin's that, Gavin's this, Gavin's that." And I've had it about myself, and you see these people at parties or events or conferences or whatever, and they're the first people to make a beeline and shake your hand. And I think that the frustrations that people want to vent, it's like, if I just abuse him, or if I leave the same comment on every single post for a week, he'll get it, he'll notice me. And I'm not saying these people shouldn't be noticed, because obviously if they've got a genuine concern, then, go through the channels to get your your needs met.
And
But
listen, that's true. And there are people that I've seen on social media who are in really desperate situations and they need help. And because of social media, we've been able to help them. And we've been able to intervene and we've been able to do stuff to support them. I had it yesterday, right? So absolutely, it can be a tool for good in that way. But the way my head works is when I sit there and I read it and then I look at the profile and I'm like, you're a 60-year-old bloke or whatever. In my head, I'm just like, what's gone wrong in your life that you're on social media doing? Like, what can I do to help? Like, how do I make it a better place for you to live, work, raise your family so that you're not finding yourself on a random Wednesday night sending someone you've never met an abusive message because they've put a post out saying we're getting a green flag status for Northlands Park? Do you know what I mean? Like, to my mind, that can't be like how we do it.
It's catch-22. You're marketing an idea, and this hypothetical 60-year-old man is opposing it, or he's got a complaint about it for whatever reason.
It's got nothing to do with that post. It's just about Gavin Callaghan's a wanker.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying about the kind of comments that you would get. They're repetitive. They go nowhere. It's just ad hominems all the time. Which one stands out the most? Which one do you don't even think about it? The first comment that you think of, you go, "Wow, that was a bit heavy," or "That made me laugh," or "It made you feel something."
Oh, there's a few that make me laugh.
Yeah, I'll bet.
To be fair, again, it's a bit like we were talking about with the political campaign earlier on. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, you've done me there. But I will actually put like the like on the comment as well, which I hope then that the public are looking at thinking,
yeah, what's this about? He got it. Because many people watching this will be thinking, what are these two doing like this together for? And back in the day, I mean, like, people won't know this. People were surprised about this when people would say, "God, I bet you hate Gavin." I'm like, no, I don't. I really like him. They're like, what? We've been reading your backwards and forwards online today, like you're posting, and it's like, yeah, I get that, but like, when it comes to 6 o'clock and the tools get put down, we pick up the phone. And I said, like, people probably think that is, that makes you all the same. It's not the same. It's just there's no need to fall out with everyone you disagree with, and if that were the case, no one would have any friends.
Listen, if I fell out with everyone I disagree, I wouldn't talk to anybody. No, do you know what I mean? Like it's that line, isn't it? You can agree to disagree agreeably. Like, and I do believe that, and I think that some of that's been lost. But again, I think it comes back to the modus operandi, and I think we shouldn't lose sight of that in all of this. When you were a conservative or independent, whatever, I thought you had the best interest of Basildon at heart. We just had different views on how we were going to get there. I worked with Kerry Smith, right?
Yeah.
Kerry and I both grew up in Dagenham.
Mm-hmm.
We blame different people for that. Right?
And I was born in Barking, so it's just down the road.
Right? He idolises Thatcher. I couldn't stand her, right?
Yeah.
So but Kerry and I, we would not agree on Brexit. We would not agree on the state of the country. We would not agree on, some matters of education policy or that kind of stuff. But I can look at Kerry and say, that is a guy who is genuinely 100% in it for the right reasons and is doing a good job on behalf of his residents, right? The same with Eddie Murphy, the same with Hazel, Val, all of them in it for the right reasons and doing a really good job. The same with the Wickford Independents. I think they're in it for the right reasons and doing a good job as well. Most of the Tories, I think, are in it for the right reasons and doing a really good job for their residents as well. Turn up at a planning meeting, speak on behalf. Fine, that's what they're there to do. Reform UK are not interested. Like, people have to understand that. They are not interested in this. What Reform UK want to do is burn the whole place down. They want you to be convinced that the council is not worth saving, that the council cannot deliver for you or your families, and that the whole operation is corrupt, it's riddled with sleaze, that there's this magic money tree they're going to be able to shake down and, it's going to uncover all of this, hidden cash that's going to be put back into services. That's why they behave the way they do on social media. And it's very, very difficult to combat it against the public that want to believe that's true. And want to believe that there is a reason why their individual circumstances have turned out like this, or their local community has turned out the way it has. Other than, for me, and whether this is too philosophical, I don't know, I hate using the word austerity, because if I asked 100 people on Basildon High Street what austerity means, I'd get 98 different responses to it, right? But the savage cuts we saw over the last 15 years absolutely decimated communities, right? I fundamentally disagree, and I think he gets away with it scot-free because of what came after. But Cameron and his mate Osborne gutted the DNA out of communities. So they're the reason why police stations closed. They're the reasons why leisure centres closed. They're the reasons why community centres closed. They're the reasons why infrastructure stopped being built out, right? And that has had such a devastating impact on communities, on a way that people feel about pride in place and where they live. And that is being fully exploited by reform now. And I come back to it. They don't have any answers as to how they're going to fix it, other than we're going to throw a grenade in, blow it up, and see where the pieces land. I cannot see a scenario where that is a good thing. What we have got to get back to, in my view, and I hope the government is supportive of us as councils in doing it, is we have to rebuild these public services from the ground up with local people. Give us devolution, give us local government reorganisation, give Basildon a budget that goes from being £38 million a year to £380 million a year, and watch what we can do with that to deliver services and outcomes for local people. And if we do some of that, we'll start to restore more faith. But you have to call these shysters out from reform. They are conservatives, and maybe even further to the right than that, walking around with new suits and a different colour rosette. But there is nothing new about this lot.
In closing, thanks for your time. I appreciate it. I think this has been something that we've wanted to get out of the way for a long time. Plus, I think it's good to have an opposite approach to things. I don't think we disagree on too much when it comes to Basildon, but I do want to end with a bit of fun. Who's your favourite councillor?
Emma Callaghan.
You tart. You bottled that one. Who's your least favourite councillor?
Sam Janae.
All right. Who's your least favourite Labour councillor?
I'm not saying. I love all of my
Yeah, councillors. I bet you do. Sunderland winning the Premier League or England winning the World Cup? Pick one.
I think for my old man, I'd want England to win the World Cup.
Fair enough. Good answer. All right, this one's a bit tongue-in-cheek. What's your favourite Michael Jackson song?
Oh, I don't know. Earth Song. Moving on.
Gavin Callaghan, thanks a lot for your time. Good luck.
Thank you.